Hello everyone, welcome to our new topic for the month of August, and we are going to be exploring foregrounds. Now I know that I had mentioned in a few posts that we're going to be talking about wildflowers. We are, but we have to build up to the wildflowers because actually if you're going to paint a landscape that includes grasses and possibly flowers, we need to be concerned about what's underneath all of that and the foreground area before we even get to adding the flowers. Flowers are last. They are the sprinkles on the cupcake. So we're not going to talk about that yet. We're going to work into that topic. And so I want to focus on foreground because foregrounds in a painting can either make or break the painting. Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, a lot of times when we're painting a landscape, we overlook the foreground. We think it's not important oftentimes, and so we don't do anything to it until the end of our painting, and then we look and we say, I got to figure out what I'm going to do with this foreground area. And then oftentimes it's not helpful to the painting. You are looking at a bad painting, meaning it's bad mostly because of what's happening or not happening in the foreground. So let's examine this bad painting because it has a bad foreground. There's this fence of grass. See these grass marks that go all the way across? There is a unequal or equal division of space, which makes it uninteresting. So we have water, land, water, land, water, land. It's just like stripes. Now, here's the problem with this. Number one, there's a fence of grass. I can't get past this, right, visually. Once I get past it, if I tried to, then I'm stopped by this area of land. Sure, there's a little bit of openings, but they're just too even. A clump here, a clump here, a clump here. What it isn't doing, it is not allowing us to get back into the painting. And I want to talk about what we want to do with foregrounds, and then I'll make some quick adjustments to this. I'm going to put this up here. Foregrounds. What is the purpose of a foreground? Well, the most important thing that we want to do for any painting is to invite the viewer into the painting. We want people to come look at our paintings. We want them to be attracted to the painting from across the room. We want them to want to come closer, and then when they come closer, we want to pull them into the painting and show them around the painting. So we don't want to prevent them from coming into the painting because we've created a barrier in the foreground, and we have to direct the viewer's eye around the painting to the most important areas. And I've talked about this before, but I'm going to reinforce this idea of creating these stepping stones to allow the viewer to move throughout the painting. So our number one goal for the foreground is to make it so that it invites the viewer into the painting, lets them in, pulls them in. And we're going to do this through using areas of contrast, and we'll talk about this more in this month. What else do we need in a foreground? We need a balance of detail, meaning we don't want it to be too much detail, because if we put all the detail in the foreground, we put a lot of grasses, maybe we put the center of interest in the foreground, then there's no incentive for the viewer to go further into the painting because it's all there. It stops the eye from moving into the painting. So too much detail is not good. But too little detail is also not good. So if we don't do anything to the foreground and just leave it a blob, that's almost not enough. We have to direct the eye past it. Now, I love to create really kind of dark, mysterious, warmish foregrounds because what happens is the viewer wants to get past that. But I always am careful to put some directing marks. I want to show you this painting right here. Should I leave it here? All right. This is an example of an effective foreground. It's a similar painting to the one up on the easel, but you can see here that I have kind of dark and mysterious at the bottom of the painting. But yet, so here is an example of a painting that has a more effective foreground than the one that was on my easel underneath. You can see here that a lot of it is left unfinished In fact, the edges are left unfinished, so there's not a lot of detail, but the detail is placed in the areas where I want the viewer to look. So like I want you to look, so I made a spot of color. The grasses are pointing us up towards the back of the painting, so hopefully the eye follows the direction of the grasses. I also created a pathway of water. I opened up the grass fence, if you will, to put a little bit of water to help lead us through the foreground into the middle distance and then finally into the background. So all of these things were done by design. I purposely made my marks and made my decisions based upon this idea that I want to invite the viewer through the foreground and into the painting. So while I will leave a little bit to the imagination of the viewer, I don't want too much detail. Remember, I want a balance, but I also need enough to get the viewer's eye through the painting. So that leads me to the third thing about foregrounds, and that often with foregrounds we are required to use our artistic license. So what does that mean? We can't copy what's exactly in front of us, whether it be a photo or whether we be painting from life. If we copy what's in front of us, we might end up creating barriers, because sometimes barriers exist. We need to remove those barriers and invite the viewer into our painting. And we're going to do this by establishing stepping stones or areas of contrast that lead through the foreground into the background or into the middle and finally the background. So what I want to do is show you very quickly today, take this bad painting, and I'll just take an old brush, and I want to just simply brush out the foreground area. Now there are a lot of different ways we can fix a bad foreground. In fact, that's going to be our challenge for this week. We'll get to that. But I'm going to remove all of this foreground stuff. And already it's looking better. Sometimes it's not what you add, but it's what you take away that helps fix a painting. Alright, so now I have more tooth to work with. I often like to spray some workable fixative to give me back some more tooth. And I'm going to just make a mention. If you're going to brush off pastel and use spray fixative, it's always a good practice to do that outside where you have ventilation. I have windows, they're open, we're fine here, but just for practice, for people ask me, why don't you wear a mask, that kind of thing. Take it outside, it's better. I don't do it inside when I'm not on a video, so just for your information. Alright, so now let's fix this foreground. What I want to first of all do is reestablish some of the darks that were in the grasses, putting in that dirt. I'm going to pull it up a little bit further. Now I'm totally working from my imagination here, but I've painted enough marsh scenes that I can imagine what it might be like. I'm taking out my artistic license. I'm layering some darks. This happens to be a autumn marsh scene, so I'm throwing in this nice dark orange color. I use dark blue and a dark burgundy, and I think I'll use the super dark eggplant just at the bottom to really establish that nice dark, mysterious, warm foreground. Now you can see already how simplifying that has now caused me to want to go back into the painting, right? So now I'm no longer hung up by this fence of grass, these lines of grass, and I'm invited more into the painting. So I'm going to continue along that vein. I think what I want to do is get rid of this this little area here, because I had too many layers or too many equal layers. So let's just break that up a little bit. That looks better. Alright, now one thing that I'm going to start to do is add back some of the water. I'll start in the distance. Why not have a little bit of water way back here? And I'm just going to make a thin line of water. Because when you get to the back of a painting, there should be something. If you're being led somewhere, right, your eye should not be led to where there is nothing to see. So I want to make sure that when we pull the viewer into the distance, that there's something enjoyable to look at. That's just a thought about that. This is all about foregrounds, so let's talk about the foreground. What am I going to do? I'm using a darker value of the blue in the water because the water is going to be darker at your feet. And I'm going to just let it kind of come out the bottom of the painting. And now what I'm going to do is start to add back some of the grasses. Let's take some of this gold color, create some vertical grass type marks. And kind of cover up where the water is exiting the bottom. I want it to be just a peak of water. I don't really want to pull you right off the page. And then I'm going to grab some of my harder pastels. I'm working with new pastels and use those to create a few linear grassy type marks. Now, during this month we'll be talking about effective ways to paint grasses. So this is kind of just a preview. I'm using hard pastels and creating what I like to call dancing lines, lyrical lines. We'll talk more about that. I'm pulling the eye up into the painting and I'm pressing and releasing on the hard pastel to create some broken lines. These are little areas of contrast. Your eye picks up on them because they're a hard edge, a bright mark against a dull area, and you notice them. So you only want to put these areas of contrast where you want the eye to look. In other words, I'm not going to put one like this right here in the corner. Why? Because now when I look at this painting, that's the first thing I see. And I don't want the eye to go over to the corner. So let's get rid of that guy, rub him out, paint over him. Oops, a little bit too light, that's okay. Put a lighter touch, but you don't want that area of contrast where you don't want the eye to go. Now, I could do some other things to make this painting better, and I probably will, and I'll post the finish in the comments of this video. But what I want to share with you today is the importance of foregrounds. Never, when you're painting, say, it's just the foreground, I don't have to worry about it. It can make or break your painting. So what you want to make sure you do is invite the viewer into your painting. You want a balance of detail, and you want to use your artistic license. So stay tuned for more.